Why did they... Okay. That's funny. It is kind of funny. Alright, here's an issue that I have with this tier list, right? One issue. They put Marxism, Leninism, and Stalinism in different categories. Honestly, I think that they should be the same category. You know? Or do I? Now I'm questioning it. Hold on. There have been some MLs online who are not necessarily the biggest Stalin dick riders. Although there's a massive overlap between Marxist-Leninists and people who will really defend Stalin. I don't know. Look, let's get it out of the way. Stalin, where's Mao? There he is. Here, let's put Hitler there. And was there somebody else that I was thinking of? No, Pol Pot, it doesn't look like Pol Pot is on this list. Alright, cool. Easy tier placements. Massive body count, basically just fascism masquerading with a coat of red paint. A lot of historians don't really acknowledge the role of these two in like creating a fascist state necessarily, or you don't see this a lot reflected in popular narratives because it's much more expedient to describe them as communists. In fact, you know, if they could get away with it, I'm sure the news would describe Hitler as a communist, you know? Their ideologies, the ideologies of the states that they ran and the movements that, well, took power, you know, Stalin and Mao, you could pretty much one-to-one map out their positions and it would be pretty damn close to Hitler. And they also have a pretty big body count next to their name. Not to say that, like, oh yeah, Hitler personally killed 6 million Jews, but, like, he was the figurehead of Nazism. The Nazi government did that. He's obviously responsible for what the Nazi government did. Stalinism, Stalin, face of Stalinism. Duh, it's Stalin. Charismatic figurehead of the all-Russian Communist Party or whatever. You know, head of the Russian government. Russian government did that shit. You know what I'm getting at, you know? And of course, Mao achieved the same thing through being a fucking moron, you know? Yeah, the social reactionism really ran deep with the governments led by these individuals. As much as the Soviet Union tried to portray itself as a workers' utopia, there was still the same degree of state control over the organization of the workers that you would have seen in Nazi Germany. The one single allowed Communist Party union, which was effectively toothless to enforce the demands or needs of the workers, and was mostly subservient to the state. The workers were very disempowered, and I assure you, although they were very smart to point out critiques of how America treated racial and sexual minorities, Russia was not much better with respect to ethnic minorities and queer people. Neither was China. Particularly with queer people. It's always the queer people. It's always the queer people that fascists really go after. And in a way, you remember how I described that in order to be successful, fascism has to pretend that it's socialism. It has to pretend that it is the rejection of the status quo in order to mask its like reactionism that is so blatant that people will be like, hey, wait a minute, you just want to kill people, you know? Maoism and Stalinism could be seen as a more successful version of that because they convinced a lot of people that they were socialists, when I assure you no form of democratic government or proletarian ownership of the means of production was happening under Mao or Stalin, you know? Liberals will say that that's evidence that they're the same thing. Yeah, liberals will see fascism and be like, is this communism? Although usually liberals are discerning enough to know that, like, oh no, Hitler wasn't a communist. There's no hammer and sickle there. You know what I mean? But with National Bolshevism, I bet they would be like, hey, wait a minute. We talked about that last time. Hello, Editing Y2K here. This is just one part of a multi-part series of me ranking all the ideologies that I know enough about to comment on. It took place over the course of 2 live streams earlier in the year, and the other parts will be all available on a playlist if you're interested. Please check it out, and thank you for watching.